Good morning, and welcome to day 2 of TXS. So today I'd like to talk to you all about the Tridion Sites architectural pieces. My name is Ben Middleton. I'm a principal architect working within the content delivery part of Tridion. I've been with RWS via SDL and various other acquisitions for over 25 years now, and I've worked with content management for all those years. So it's close to my heart, the things that we've been working on recently with Tridion, and I'm really excited to share some of the technical things that we have today. So I'd like to start out by talking a little bit about what we've done recently in Tridion Sites 9.6. So over yesterday and today, you will learn much about the features, the business features. I'll touch a little bit on them and also talk about some of the architectural pieces that sit below these business features. And I will cover this across Content Manager and the content delivery components of Tridion Sites. Now, obviously, content delivery also serves our Tridion Docs customers. So what I share today about content delivery is equally relevant to many of the Docs customers that we have as well. And I'll highlight where these things are Content Manager agnostic, if you like. So I'd like to talk a little bit again about the Semantic AI story that we've been sharing over the last couple of days. I'll touch briefly on the entitlements piece that we have in the site side of the platform now. I can give you some updates on our platform support, and I'll talk about the new core service REST and some of the UX improvements we had on the content manager side and our semantic content modeling, which we have on the content delivery side. And you'll see more about that later today with Paul Adams. So first up is our semantic AI stuff. So you heard already yesterday about why this is interesting to our customers and why we're building it. It's really about how do we expose taxonomy-based faceted search to our web applications. So we have an editorial system that allows us to tag content. We use the concept where a field or a category relates to a single concept scheme or a single concept-based facet. So we're trying to keep that one-to-one-to-one mapping all the way along through our system. Both of our editorial systems allow you to tag your content, and you will have seen some of that already. They support auto-classification, which means you can provide a body of content and the system will work out the most relevant concepts from that content, which then allow us to refine and improve how your content is tagged. And we're allowed to do that across batch as well, across multiple components or pages within your various systems. We're obviously using Semantic Web Company's class-leading semantic technology platform, which is Poolparty, and you've heard from our colleagues yesterday about how that system works. And in order for us to make best use of that, so that we're not relying on live connections to the taxonomy system, we have an Elasticsearch-based index. So it's decoupled from the taxonomy system underneath, and that allows us to scale it using our already existing Elasticsearch-based search system that we have. And then finally, we expose all of this through the Dynamic Experience Delivery Platform's content service, in particular our GraphQL API. So this diagram, which you may have seen before, just gives you an overview of how our semantic AI is sort of wired together under the hood. So if you follow the path through here, you'll have your knowledge manager who typically is responsible for maintaining your taxonomy. So they may use a pre-existing taxonomy and augment it with your industry-specific concepts, or you may build this from scratch if you wish. But there's typically a job that we use, a job that we have for someone to maintain that taxonomy, and we can use taxonomy space in order to do that. And you've seen some of that already, I hope. So once we have that taxonomy, we obviously wire it into our content management systems. So it's quite easy to configure and hook them up. And then the editors can make use of the facilities that I've described already. So that includes classifying your topics in the docs case and classifying content within sites. It can make use of concept suggestions through the auto suggestion piece. And again, we can use that batch tagging functionality that allows you to manage larger volumes of content using this taxonomy that you've built. That content is then published at some point. So once you've done your authoring, you will publish out to your content management system. So that can obviously be a production system, or it can be a staging environment. So you can look to see how this is going to look prior to pushing it to production. And we use our usual transport process that we have between content management systems. So we have a transport package that contains the information that we have from the content manager, and that includes specific links to the concept IDs from our taxonomy that you've built in taxonomy space. So essentially, it's the same body of content that you would normally send, and it includes additional information. That's then published into our deployer, and that will then do a couple of things. It will obviously unpick the content and place it into two things. So one is it will put the content into our regular broker database, which is our primary RDBMS-based content store. And it also indexes that content into our Elasticsearch search index. So for those familiar with the Elasticsearch search that we added to Tridion Sites in 9.5, and have been in Tridion Docs for a while now, that contains an Elasticsearch representation of the content, optimized for searching, of course, and we add in those concept IDs to that index. So we now have additional information in that index that we can then use for querying. In addition to that, we also maintain a separate index within Elasticsearch of those concepts. And if you recall on the previous page, I talked about that decoupled index. That's what this decoupled index has. So it has a representation of your taxonomy and all the relationships between them. It includes all things like your labels, your preferred labels, all the translations for those labels. We have a complete picture of that taxonomy-based taxonomy sitting in Elastic that sits alongside our Elasticsearch index. So the deployer is responsible for populating that concept index that we call it. You'll see the pool party connector in this diagram here. This is part of our connector framework. And I think Nicholas's team was sharing how that connector framework works. So we use that same connector framework to talk to pool party in this case. And it's that's responsible for getting the taxonomy tree, if you like, from pool party. And we use that to populate our concept index. So there's some sort of optimizations within this process. So clearly, if you haven't changed your hierarchy or your structure of your taxonomy tree, there's no need to rebuild the search indexes, because obviously we're not changing the way that the concepts interact with each other. So we can just update the labels. So if it's just adding a translation, for instance, then we can just update those labels as part of that update of that concept index. So we have these kind of optimizations in that process, which means that the sort of incremental indexing of your content and changes in the taxonomy are pretty fast. So obviously when you first publish, you have to pull down the whole taxonomy from pool party. So depending on how large your taxonomy is, that will be impacted during your deploy process. But once it's in there, it's then very fast to update and do incremental changes around that. So we have this content in our Elasticsearch system. And obviously the core data also sits in our broker database. And then we come to how the website or web users or end users, it doesn't have to be web-based necessarily, interact with this content. So they will obviously have some kind of user interface that allows them to find facets of content from your content. And it could be a simple sort of traditional faceted search interface, much like you'd have on somewhere like Amazon, where you drill down and refine each time with a more specialized concept, or it could be driven by some kind of bot or something like that, where you have an interaction with a system that allows you to ask it for certain content, and you can refine in that kind of way. We also support the idea of suggested content at the delivery side. So if you have a taxonomy in there, you've already got this structure relating to related concepts, for instance, and you may want to expose them through your web application. So you build this in your web application, and then this is all exposed through our GraphQL API. And this is where you've seen this yesterday in the demo that was shown in the morning, where you can see how that content is typically exposed on customer website. So this is the kind of the moving pieces we have within Semantic AI in the architecture side. So next up, so I want to touch briefly on the core service REST work that we've been building in our content manager. So this is something we've worked on for a while, but we're now making it fully public. So it's essentially one API that we're going to use for all internal interactions through Experience Space, for instance, but also for our add-ons. It has native support for our external content library and for Translation Manager. We've added support to align the item properties or the lists in those item properties. So further improvements during the development of this to optimize lists. It's open API based. So for those familiar with that, there's a sort of Swagger document that you can interrogate and you can introspect. So you can find out what's available on that API. And if you go to our GitHub Developer Hub, you will see an API there that you can sort of navigate online to see how that works. That also allows any client tool to interact with it, and it can build all the client libraries that you need to talk to a backend service that's open API based. It provides that introspection layer. It has hideous links and typical JSON data model. So this allows you to drill down nicely. It's extra metadata added to that data structure, which you can see here. So you can see in the list of links here, there's the additional data that you have within here that allows you to further drill down and find out about these entities within the content. So we feel this is a very nice API for us to expose now, and it's something that we would like to build upon in future releases as well. On the UX side, architecturally, we've been doing the usual sort of architectural tweaks underneath to support some of the new business features. And if you saw yesterday's session, you'll see many of these shown in our What's New sessions. So we have obviously full support now in Experience Space for the taxonomy. So you have all the ability to find those concepts. We have a full sort of category keyword editor now that we have. We can do ECL translation and editing as well using the new UI. And the message center has been enhanced, so you can now see additional error reporting within that when there's issues during publishing, for instance. We've improved the search within the Experience Space. We have support for publishing, automated publishing bundles, which is also exposed through the UI. And a number of other sort of accessibility and usability enhancements. I do encourage you to have a little look around, because it's much improved now in terms of how many clicks you need. It's far fewer than you would need in previous editing experiences, particularly compared to the sort of classic UI. Next up, I want to touch briefly on our semantic content models. And Paul will share a better session on this later today. But essentially what it's providing us with is automated semantic mapping of Tridion Sites content models. So if you've defined your schemas within sites, these are now dynamically and on the fly exposed within our GraphQL content service. And it means you no longer have to sort of drill into data models buried deep within some nested JSON, for instance. It's now far more elegantly exposed. And it's exposed across all of our GraphQL root queries. So not only in this sample you can see on the right here, which is our traditional items query, but if you're using our new search queries and you include broker database contents in that search, you can use these same semantic content models in order to access and build your data. So it makes for a more sort of pleasant user experience when you're navigating your structures. And it supports all the sort of nesting and all the other things that you may have within your data structures within Tridion Sites. I want to talk briefly about our entitlements. So we've reintroduced entitlements into the platform. It's something that helps us, not just in the case of finding out whether customers are licensed to use our software at all, but it's actually useful from a customer's perspective as well, in that we can keep a track on how our various components are being used based on individual features and components within the software. So it does provide value for customers in terms of, if you have a support issue, for instance, we can already see things like the version of the modules that you're running on your system. So again, it provides useful feedback for us. It's done on a per customer basis. And as I said, we track it through versions and through features. Between the various CM and CD parts of it, we use either user or CPU-based licensing. There is a grace period in that license setup, so it doesn't start validating license for a certain period after startup of these services. So that allows you to do certain operations without having to worry about whether your license is active or whether you have a connection to the backend service, which sits in a cloud. And finally, I want to talk briefly on the current platform updates we've had. So from the access management side, we've improved our single sign-on. So we now have OpenID Connect and SAML2 support and the ability to wire in other identity providers. And then from the database side, you can see here the databases that we're now supporting. The ones that have an asterisk next to them are our deprecated support. So we'd encourage customers upgrading to move to the latest versions if they can. We obviously added Elasticsearch onto this list. It's worth noting for those that follow the Elasticsearch licensing shenanigans is that we're currently using the last Apache 2 license version, which was 7.10. We have plans in future to work out the next stage of the licensing, but for now, this is the one we're using. From operating system side, we have the various browser supports that we'll be updating to later versions. We're using the latest versions of Red Hat. So these are, we've always said that customers typically will use the latest minor version of these releases rather than having to wait for specific ones that they've tested. And that goes hand in hand with Windows servers, for instance, where you'll have, frequent security updates. So we expect our software to work with those latest security updates on each of these versions that we support. From the virtual machine and browser side, you can see the technologies we have here. So .NET Core is used by our connector framework and also within our delivery platform, because the connector actually runs .NET within our delivery platform, even though that's a Java delivery side. We've switched over to the latest Eclipse Temurin Java JDK. So formerly it was known as Adopt Open JDK. So we're just following that through so we continue to receive security updates. And of course, we still support Oracle's own JDK 11. There's no support for 17 yet in this release. And you can see the VMs on this list as well. And then finally, on the application server side, so obviously for the CM side, it's iOS 10. And then on the delivery side, we've updated to the latest versions of each of the existing ones, except for Apache Tomcat. So we're still on Apache Tomcat 9 because the latest version of Apache Tomcat has problems with Spring at the moment. then briefly, we've dropped some components in the 9.6 release. So the context expressions module has been dropped. So that was used previously by our campaign management software, and then it was kind of kept on as a sort of an interim piece, but very few people were using it, and that was deprecated a while ago now. We've dropped some of the legacy transport protocols, so now we're only supporting HTTPS and HTTPN, the discovery service connections format. Our in-process server APIs for content delivery have now been dropped, so all the existing Java living in .NET through Juggernet, that's all gone now, so it's much allows us to focus our efforts on our REST-based APIs and our GraphQL APIs, because these were quite old APIs that very few people were using. And finally, the content delivery quick installer is being dropped as a core component, and we've open sourced it now. So it lives within our RWS GitHub repository. Okay, so that covers what we covered in our Tridion Sites 9.6 release. I just want to take a couple more minutes to talk about what's coming up. So these are some of the areas within Content Manager and Content Delivery that we would like to work upon. So this covers, in particular, Semantic AI. We'd like to continue our UI extensibility, improve our collaboration and workflow. Nick's team will continue to expand our connector ecosystem. And obviously, we want to keep our platforms up to date. On the content delivery side, we have some areas that I'll discuss coming up. So firstly, on Content Manager, on the productivity side, we want to improve our editorial workflow, provide multi-file upload support. There's a lot of experience space features that we want to include for the extensibility, so customers can start making use of user extensions within experience base. We want to have support for configurable lists and add full translation manager support. And we also have plans for improvements around the whole blueprinting experience and getting general sort of customer feedback around our user experience in general. On the Semantic AI piece, we're looking at whether we can include some search functionalities across pool party, improve the support for experience optimization with pool party. So maybe that includes tagging around that, and maybe perhaps include support for metadata tagging around that. And then finally, on the platform side, we further improve our core service REST endpoint. We'd like to bring in .NET Core support. There's areas around the add-on service that we have in mind that we wish to improve. And we'd also like to look at getting Experience Manager working with templateless data pipeline. So these are all things we're working on in the upcoming releases around Content Manager. And we'll hear more about these in the future. On the connector side, we have a few expanded connector areas that we wish to work around. So in particular, marketing automation, digital asset management. And that will also help us with some future sort of CDN related stories that we have. Personalization will obviously continue to play a major part through the connector piece. And we're looking to build some kind of integration platform as a service here as well. And on the delivery side, we would like to expose the ability to find related content through our GraphQL endpoint. So we have this information about content. We can find related concepts, but we'd like to extend that to include related content, so we can pull that out and do related links on the fly. We want to improve our CDN support and really make our binary publishing optimized for use with such CDNs. We're looking at perhaps introducing access management to replace our token service. So then you can have expiring tokens and various other things from the delivery side. As I said before, we would like to investigate how we can expose Experience Manager on our data pipeline where there's no templates there. For Tridion Docs customers, we're looking to improve our usability of our data models. So the semantic content models is an area that we can investigate and make the docs experience more user-friendly. We wish to optimize the deploy pipeline merge process. So for those that use deployer add-ons, there's a bit of a challenge at the moment that you can't merge two pipelines with the same ID. So we will correct that, and that will help customers that are building out deployer add-ons. And this is something that the connector team are also using quite extensively at the moment. And we'd like to further improve our content cache. So we've done a lot of work in recent months around optimizing and finding the best way of scaling this for our customers with large content volumes, and we'll continue that effort to try and make our cache as optimal as we can. And then finally, we wish to add Java 17 LTS support to the platform, and that will be across the board. For not just running, we'll also start building our product using Java 17. And then ongoing across all our products is our security drive. So we will continue to drive down all our security vulnerabilities. We're already reaching stage 1. Docs has reached stage 2, so we will aim to get the rest of sites up to stage 2 and then continue to weed out any final security issues within either the code or within our third-party dependencies. So that was my session for today. I hope it gives you a brief insight to what we've been doing recently in Tridion Sites 9.6 and perhaps what we're building going forward beyond this time. I've got a little bit of time for Q&As. So please ask your questions and we'll endeavor to ask them. But if you have any questions beyond our time, then reach out and I'm happy to help answer them. So there's a question from Frank about how often does the entitlement service talk to AWS service. So as Andreas said, it's the other way around, but it's the services do make regular requests to our cloud-based entitlement service.
Hi, another question just came in for you. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So I said, have any client requests concerns about exposing Tridion to the internet? Is this related to entitlements, I guess is the question. So I think the general goal is if you have we can set up some kind of, I mean, these are outgoing requests, so it's the entitlement service that would need securing, but typically outgoing requests shouldn't be a challenge, I wouldn't have thought. Okay, well, I think that's it I don't see any more questions coming in. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.